Welcome to Biggest Spoilars, the destination for exclusive spoilers, latest updates.
Rick arrives at Sunny's, and Sunny needs his family to make sure that Michael doesn't lose his kitties. Rick reminds his family that he represented Willow in the original guardianship trial, so he can't switch sides now. Sunny just needs him to broker a concession between them. Rick says Michael and Willow see each other as a trouble to their kitties and likely won't compromise, and he doesn't suppose Michael will give him the time of day after what went down at the guardianship hearing. Where has Tracy been? In the Quartermain kitchen, Chase and Brooklyn are drooling when Emma and Gio arrive, wondering how frenetic Tracy is, which mystifications Brooklyn. Gio and Emma explain that Tracy went to Drew's to collect the family heritage, but they haven't heard from her since last night. When Brooklyn confirms Tracy isn't home, she panics and says they've to find her. Just also, Tracy turns up, likely seeing they were talking about her, and everyone moves in for a group clinch, knowing she's safe. She also fills them in that she got stuck in hell with Martin, but she did resolve the issue. She induced Martin that Drew had no claim to their property, and Martin indeed helped her cargo some of their most cherished effects into her auto. The rest will be picked up today. What does Willow do next? Alexis arrives at work and learns from Suzanne that Willow is staying for her in her office. Alexis enters and asks if Commodity happed with Drew. Willow says Drew can't move or communicate other than blinking his eyes, but he can hear and understand everything around him. She needs Alexis' help with her forthcoming guardianship hail, given she doesn't have Drew. Alexis asks about Rick, but Willow doesn't trust him as he faded on her formerly. She believes it's only a matter of time before the PCPD pursues Michael, who's also dating Jacinda, a miscreant. She hands her a brochure of evidence. It's a dossier Drew had drawn up on all her crimes, which wouldn't look good to the judge. Alexis believes she isn't the right person for this case. Willow plays hardball and notes that if she doesn't get her kitties, Alexis doesn't get to see Scout. She doesn't like saying it, but they do what they've to for the bones. They love. Alexis agrees to take her case. Willow cries, as she feels so much better with her on her side. Willow leaves, and Suzanne checks on Alexis. Alexis says Willow just blackmailed her into representing her, or no Scout. Alexis notes this time she'd be helping to hand over the kitties to a woman who shot Drew in the reverse. Suzanne says she just needs to trust the system and flash back that the judge and Michael's attorney are also part of the equation. Lucas upsets Marco, again. At Bobby's, Lucas and Marco meet for a lunch date, and Lucas has been allowing about them getting their own apartment. Marco asks if he's not happy at Windmere. Lucas says Windmere is his pater's place, not theirs. Marco explains that he's been suitable to get much near to his father by living there. Lucas gets right to the point and says Pascal creeps him out. Lucas mentions going down to the basement for a bottle of wine when Pascal suddenly appeared behind him, supposedly through a retired passage from the vault. Marco becomes stern and again tells Lucas to leave the vault alone. Lucas notes this is the alternate time he snapped at him over the vault. Marco claims that as a child, he got lost in a delve, which frightened him, and he doesn't want him to get hurt. Lucas says he's an adult and can take care of himself. Is it love for Michael and Jacinda? Michael is having lunch with Jacinda, and they missed each other while riding out the storm independently. Christina turns up and is glad to see her family smiling and laughing. Christina joins them, and they make small talk about Molly and Cody, as well as Scout moving in with the Davis girls. Christina asks her family whether there has been any update from the PCPD on whether he'll be charged. Michael says he hasn't heard and Dubaitis Turner will want to take on another losing case. They all briefly bandy Jacinda working with and learning a lot from Nina. That's when Michael gets a call from his pater, summoning him to the house. Sunny makes a request of Michael. Michael arrives at Sunny's and finds Rick there. Sunny explains that Rick will try to work Commodity out with him and Willow regarding guardianship. Michael thinks he doesn't need to, as he has sole guardianship. Rick points out that Michael is in a different situation now, and a suspect in Drew's firing. Willow will admit visit or partial guardianship, which could lead to her gaining full guardianship. Sunny insists that Michael find a way to compromise. At the harbor master's cabin. In the harbor master's cabin, Britt wakes up in bed and finds Jason formerly over. They partake a kiss, and she wishes they could stay then, as it'll be hard to stay down from him back in city. He says it wouldn't be for long, as they're going to set her free. Jason reminds her that they're in this together, thanks her for trusting him, and he wouldn't abandon her. She knows they've to keep their distance, but perhaps Jason wouldn't put her life at threat by sneaking around with her, as they will be being watched. Jason promises Britt will help them get her drug figured out, and they kiss again. They also depart for the mainland. A bit latterly. Jason shows up at the queues as everyone is about to help Tracy bring the heritages in, and chase prodigies where he's been. Britt walks into Bobby's, where Marco and Lucas still are. Lucas notes Britt is wearing the same thing she was history. Marco suggests she got stuck in the storm nearly, but Lucas thinks she's doing the walk of shame. Christina and Jacinda continue to talk about Michael, and Christina is glad they make one another happy. That's when Willow walks by and tries to sputter up Christina. She says her mama will represent her at the Hale, also thanks Jacinda for all she's done to reunite her with her kitties. In the show's final moments. At Sunny's, Michael refuses to negotiate, so if Willow wants a concession, she should come to him. That's when Michael gets a call. It's Diane who needs him at Turner's office to be questioned in Drew's firing. At Bobby's, Willow tells Jacinda that her sketchy history will make sure she gets visit, or indeed more, as a judge will see she's not fit to be around kiddies. Christina tells Willow she should concentrate on herself and her own crazy conduct before dragging Jacinda through the slush. Willow also says Christina's unwarranted attack is making her rethink who Alexis exposes Scout to. Across the place, Lucas agrees to deal with Pascal. Marco again asks him to stay out of the vault, so Lucas pledges. Marco says they can start allowing about an apartment of their own in May. Britt returns to her upstairs room, looks in her hole, and finds that her meds are missing. She looks around in the other snuggeries, but they're nowhere to be set up. She panics, turns the place upside down, but no meds. At Alexis' office, Suzanne promises to help Alexis get through this hail. Alexis worries that if Michael gets arrested and Willow gets full guardianship, how long can she stay quiet to get what she wants? In the Q's kitchen, as Chase bickers with Jason about the kitties, who he left alone in a snowstorm, Emma gets a call. She also passes on the communication to everyone. An officer in France set up her grandma after she claimed to have been held hostage and escaped. Her grandma said she demanded to advise everyone that Faison is alive. The snow had finally loosened its grip on Port Charles, but the town did not feel free. Instead, it felt baptized in cold truth, washed clean of comforting illusions, and left raw beneath a sky that promised no mercy. The storm had passed, yet the echoes of what it revealed still thundered through every hallway, every living room, and every guarded heart. People stepped back into their lives carrying secrets heavier than the snowdrifts that still lined the streets. At Sonny Corinthos' house, the air was thick with tension before a single word was spoken. Rick Lansing stood near the doorway, coat still on, his presence alone a reminder of battles fought and alliances broken. Sonny didn't bother with pleasantries. He never did when it came to family. "I need you," Sonny said quietly, his voice low but edged with urgency. "Not as a lawyer. As my brother." Rick exhaled, already sensing the trap in those words. Sonny explained what kept him awake at night, the fear that Michael, strong and stubborn as he was, could lose everything if the custody fight with Willow spiraled any further out of control. The children were no longer just children in this war, they were leverage, symbols of victory or defeat. Rick shook his head, reminding Sonny of the line he couldn't cross. He had represented Willow before. He had stood beside her in court, argued her case, defended her choices. He couldn't simply flip sides because Sonny wanted him to. The law didn't bend that way, and neither did his conscience. Sonny didn't ask him to betray Willow. He asked him to do something harder. He asked Rick to stand in the middle of the battlefield and convince two parents who now saw each other as enemies to lay down their weapons long enough to find common ground. Rick didn't hide his doubts. Michael and Willow no longer saw compromise as strength. They saw it as weakness. They saw each other as threats to the very souls of their children. And after what had happened in the courtroom, Rick was certain Michael wouldn't even want to hear his voice, let alone take his advice. But Sonny wasn't ready to give up. He never was. Not when it came to blood. Across town, in the familiar chaos of the Quartermain kitchen, a very different storm was brewing, one fueled not by legal threats or power plays, but by fear and affection. Chase and Brooke Lynn were mid-conversation when Emma and Gio burst in, eyes wide, voices overlapping as they asked the same question at once. "How mad is Tracy?" Brooke Lynn froze. Mad about what? They explained, haltingly, that Tracy had gone to Drew's place the night before, determined to retrieve a family heirloom that had somehow ended up in his possession. But since then, no one had heard from her. Not a call. Not a message. Nothing. Brooke Lynn's face drained of color. Tracy Quartermain didn't disappear. She stormed out. She slammed doors. She made sure everyone knew exactly where she was and why. Silence from Tracy was never a good sign. Just as panic began to take hold, the door opened. Tracy stood there, coat askew, hair slightly windblown, wearing the unmistakable look of someone who had survived something deeply unpleasant. For a split second, no one spoke. Then everyone moved at once, surrounding her in a group hug that surprised even Tracy herself. Once the relief settled, she launched into her story. She described her night as being stuck in hell with Martin Gray, an experience she promised no one should ever have to endure. But she hadn't walked away empty-handed. Tracy never did. She had convinced Martin that Drew had absolutely no claim to the Quartermain property or their cherished heirlooms. In fact, she'd talked him into helping her load several of their most treasured possessions into her car. The rest, she declared with a triumphant lift of her chin, would be picked up later. It was a small victory in a town full of looming defeats, but the Quartermains took it where they could. At Alexis Davis's office, the day began with a warning instead of a greeting. Suzanne informed her that Willow Kane was waiting inside, already seated, already prepared. Alexis stepped in cautiously, bracing herself. Willow didn't waste time on small talk. She explained that Drew could no longer speak or move, except for the slow blink of his eyes. He could hear. He could understand. But he couldn't fight. And that meant she needed Alexis more than ever. She asked for help with the upcoming custody hearing, her voice trembling just enough to sound vulnerable. But beneath the softness was steel. Alexis asked about Rick, hoping Willow would reconsider. Willow dismissed him, saying he had disappeared on her once and could do it again. She painted Michael as a ticking time bomb, a man bound to be pursued by the PCPD, especially now that he was involved with Jacinda, a woman with a criminal past. Then Willow handed over the folder. Inside was a carefully compiled dossier, a record of Jacinda's crimes, mistakes, and missteps, all neatly organized and ready to be used as a weapon in court. It was Drew's work, Willow said, his insurance policy. Now it was hers. Alexis closed the folder slowly. She told Willow she wasn't the right person for this case. She tried to refuse. That's when Willow changed. Her voice hardened. Her eyes sharpened. She reminded Alexis of Scout. Of how much Alexis loved that little girl. And then she drew the line in the coldest way possible. If she didn't get her children back, Alexis wouldn't get to see Scout anymore. I don't like saying it, Willow said softly, but we do what we have to for the ones we love. The words landed like a slap. Alexis agreed. Willow's shoulders sagged in relief, tears spilling over as she thanked her, as if she hadn't just forced her hand. When Willow finally left, Suzanne stepped in, concern etched across her face. Alexis admitted the truth, she'd been blackmailed. And worse, she feared she might now be helping a woman who had once shot Drew in the back gain control of her children. Suzanne tried to reassure her. The system, she said, still existed. The judge would have a say. Michael's lawyer would fight. Alexis wasn't the only voice in the room. But Alexis wasn't convinced. At Bobby's, Lucas Jones sat across from Marco Rios, stirring his coffee as if searching for the right words. He finally admitted he'd been thinking about them getting their own place. Something that belonged to them, not to Windmere or the shadows that clung to it. Marco asked if Lucas was unhappy there. Lucas explained that Windmere would always be his father's home, not theirs. Marco confessed that living there had brought him closer to his own father in ways he hadn't expected. Then Lucas said the thing he'd been holding back. Pascal creeps me out. He described the moment in the wine cellar when Pascal had suddenly appeared behind him, seemingly emerging from nowhere, from the hidden catacombs beneath the estate. The memory still made Lucas' skin crawl. Marco's reaction was instant and sharp. He told Lucas, again, to stay away from the catacombs. When Lucas pointed out this wasn't the first time Marco had snapped about them, Marco finally offered an explanation. As a child, he'd gotten lost in a cave. The fear had never left him. He didn't want Lucas getting hurt. Lucas pushed back, reminding Marco he was an adult. He could take care of himself. But the tension between them lingered, unresolved, like so many things in Port Charles. Not far away, Michael Corinthos sat at a table with Jacinda, the two of them sharing an easy laughter that felt almost foreign in a town so heavy with conflict. They talked about the storm, about missing each other, about small, ordinary things that felt precious because of how rare they had become. Christina joined them, happy to see her brother smile. The conversation drifted to Molly, to Cody, to Scout settling in with the Davis girls. For a moment, it felt like a family lunch instead of a prelude to another crisis. Christina asked about the PCPD. Michael shrugged it off, saying he doubted the ADA wanted to chase another losing case. They joked about Jacinda learning from Nina, about the strange paths people took to become better versions of themselves. Then Michael's phone rang. Sonny wanted him at the house. At the harbor master's cabin, the mood couldn't have been more different. Britt woke to find Jason already dressed, already moving, already planning their next step. They shared a quiet kiss, the kind that carried more promise than passion. Britt wished they could stay there, away from the eyes of Port Charles, away from the danger. Jason reminded her they couldn't hide forever. He promised her freedom, promised that Britt would help them figure out her missing medication, promised he wouldn't abandon her. They kissed again before heading back to the world waiting for them. Back at Sonny's, Michael walked into a conversation he didn't want to have. Rick was there. Sonny explained the plan. Rick would try to help broker a deal between Michael and Willow. Michael wasn't interested. He believed he held the stronger hand. Rick reminded him that things had changed. Being a suspect in Drew's shooting shifted the balance. Willow would get visitation at the very least, and that could become something more. Sonny urged his son to find a compromise. Michael refused. The standoff was cut short when his phone rang again. Diane's voice on the other end was serious. The ADA wanted him at Turner's office. Now. At Bobby's, Willow made her own moves. She approached Christina and Jacinda, thanking Jacinda with a sweetness that barely hid the venom beneath. She hinted that Jacinda's past would work in her favor in court, that a judge would never trust someone like her around children. Christina snapped back, telling Willow to take a hard look at her own actions before throwing stones. Willow's response was chilling. She suggested that Christina's attack might make her rethink who Alexis allowed around Scout. The threat was clear. Elsewhere, Lucas promised Marco he would stay out of the catacombs. They talked about finding an apartment in May, about starting fresh. Britt returned to her room and opened her drawer. Her medication was gone. She searched everywhere, panic rising with every empty space, every unanswered question. At Alexis' office, Suzanne offered support as Alexis voiced her deepest fear. If Michael was arrested and Willow gained full custody, how long could she keep quiet about what she knew? In the Quartermain kitchen, Chase and Jason bickered about leaving the kids alone during the storm when Emma's phone rang. The call came from France. An officer had found her grandmother. Anna Devane had escaped captivity. And she had a message for everyone back home. Caesar Faison was alive. The words spread through the room like ice through veins. And in that moment, Port Charles understood something fundamental: the storm had never really ended. It had only changed shape.